Are there any matters that we need to take up before we bring jurors out?
Not on behalf of the state, Your Honor.
All right, go ahead and bring jurors, please. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back. Thank you all for arriving promptly so we could get underway. Check to make sure that you have your notebooks. And let me ask of the state, is there further evidence for the state?
There is, Your Honor. At this time, the state would call Miss Amber Alberts to the stand.
On the desk there.
Would you place your left hand on the Bible and raise your right, please? Do you solemnly swear the testimony you give this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. Have a seat, please.
All right, Mr. Waller.
Thank you, Your Honor. Miss Alberts, good morning.
Good morning.
Will you please state your name for the record?
Amber Alberts.
Can you spell your last name for us?
Alberts.
Where do you currently reside? And you don't have to give me an exact address, but what area do you live in?
Franklin County.
In Franklin County?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and who do you live with?
My mother.
Back in May of 2013, where were you living?
In Oxford.
Who were you living with in Oxford?
Michelle Perry, Joey Perry, Ronald Anthony, and Travion Smith.
Miss Alberts, before we get into that, are you employed, ma'am?
Yes.
Okay. And tell us generally what type of employment you do.
I'm pretty much a cashier.
And what type of dealerships do you work with, or type of store do you work with now?
All kinds of different car dealerships.
Back in May of 2013, what type of work were you doing?
I was working at Walmart.
How long did you work at Walmart?
Then it was 2 years. But it was 3.
It was how long?
3 years.
And you said you worked at a Walmart. Which Walmart specifically did you work at?
In Wake Forest.
You said you were living in Oxford in May of 2013. And what was the address of that Oxford house?
I could not tell you.
Did it have a Wake Forest address, but was in the Granville County line?
No.
Okay. So it wasn't Granville County.
Yes, sir.
Describe this house for us that you were living in, Miss Alvarez.
It was 3-bedroom, had a kitchen, mudroom, dining room, living room, backyard, big back deck, big front deck.
You said you were living with a Michelle and Joseph Perry, is that right?
Mhm.
Who are they?
They're just friends. Knew them for a pretty long time. I went to school with them. So we needed somewhere to live, so they were somebody that I could depend on and hopefully find somewhere to stay because I had nowhere else to go.
And did you own this home, or were y'all renting it?
Renting.
How was the rent divided up between you and the Perrys?
It was divided between me and Michelle.
And how was it divided up? Was it equally?
Yes.
And you said there were some other folks living there with you as well.
Yeah, Joey, which is her husband. Her 2 kids, she has a boy and a girl. And then Ronald, Anthony, and Travion Smith, they live there kind of an on and off.
Let me ask you about those individuals. First of all, we'll talk about Ronald Anthony. How do you know Ronald Anthony?
I met him in June of 2009. We were an on and off relationship. It was a bad relationship. We stopped talking for years, and then he got out of prison, and then we started talking again, and then we got back together.
You said you were in a relationship. Was this a romantic relationship?
I guess you can say it was. To me it was, maybe not to him, but to me it was.
And you said that it was a bad relationship.
Yeah, it wasn't the best one.
Tell me a little bit about that. Why did you think it was a bad relationship?
He cheated a lot with a lot of different girls. And I guess I can say I was young. I was pretty much stupid. I didn't listen. I guess I had to learn on my own. And there was a lot of girls, a lot of them.
You said you were young, still look young. How are you? How old are you now?
I'm 25.
I'm sorry?
25.
And what's your birthday?
9/9/90.
So this relationship had been going on with Ronald Anthony for several years in May of 2013.
Mm-hmm.
You said he lived there with you sometimes?
When he felt like it.
When did he start staying with you and Michelle and Joey there in Oxford?
I believe we moved in like, I want to say end of March, beginning of April. It wasn't long. He had came in like 2 weeks after we had already moved in. He'd stay a couple days, maybe a week, and then he'd leave for a couple days.
And when you say you moved in March or April, was that of 2013 or?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So you hadn't been in this house very long as of May of 2013.
No, sir.
Where did Ronald sleep when he was there at the house?
He slept in the bed with me.
You said there were 3 bedrooms. How were the rooms kind of divided up?
One room was mine and his. The other one was the 2 kids, and then the master bedroom was Joey and Michelle's.
And when Ronald would stay there, did he stay there on any kind of regular basis? Would he stay 2 or 3 nights or 5 nights? How'd that work?
It varied so much you could never keep track of it.
Did he have to leave on specific dates when he was there with you, Miss Alvarez?
Sometimes he would have to go to court, so his mother would come and pick him up from my job, which is Walmart. She would come and pick him up, take him to downtown, and he would go to court and then do as he pleases, and then eventually he'd come back.
How did Mr. Anthony or Ronald Anthony get back and forth from Oxford to the Walmart in Wake Forest and then downtown Raleigh?
Joey, from Oxford to Wake Forest, Joey and Michelle had a car. That's how I got back and forth to work. I didn't have a vehicle at the time. So we would, if Michelle had to be at work at 9 and I'd have to be working till 11, we would just all ride with her and I'd wait until I have to go to work.
Did Ronald Anthony have a car of his own?
No, sir.
Travion Smith, you said he lived there as well.
Yes.
When did Travion Smith start living there?
In April.
Of what
When
year?
he first came around in April when we lived in Franklinton. They were moving from there because their lease was up.
When you say they were moving from there?
Joey and Michelle, their lease was up. So they
were you
had,
living, let me interrupt you just a second. Were you living with Joey and Michelle in Franklinton as well?
for about 2 weeks, their lease was about to be up. So we all had to figure out where we were all going to go. They had found a friend of theirs that had a house that they were moving out of because they wanted a bigger house. They owned the house. So we talked to them, made an agreement with them, signed a contract and everything, and agreed to stay there under their circumstance. And eventually we finally got to move in. My parents, a couple friends, Joey and Michelle, and their parents also helped us move in.
That was moving into the house in Oxford?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And again, that was around March of 2012? Or?
Yeah, about end of March, beginning of April.
And then you said Ronald showed up a couple weeks later. And then how long after Ronald started staying with you was it when Travion started staying there?
He came with him.
Now tell us a little bit about how you know Travion Smith.
I don't know him. We got a phone call one night when we were still living in Franklinton. He got kicked out of his house. He had nowhere to go. It was pouring down rain. I kind of felt bad. I didn't know him. Didn't know anything about him. So I told him it was fine. He could go get him and he could come stay with us for a while. He just had to figure out where he was going to go because bills don't pay their own. So eventually they went and got him later that night and he came back.
And you say they went and got him. Who went and got Travion?
Ronald and Joey.
Where did Travion stay when he was there at the house in Oxford?
He stayed in the living room.
Was there a couch or pull-out bed?
Yes, there was a couch.
What was your relationship like with Travion Smith?
We didn't really talk much. He just kind of stayed there. We might have little, small conversations like, hey, how are you? Talk about, if he had any girlfriends or just how he was feeling. And that was really it. We didn't really talk much.
And how about the interaction between Travion and Ronald? What was their interaction like when they were there at the house when you saw them?
They were like brothers.
Going to May of 2013, Ms. Alberts, do you recall Ronald Anthony and Travion staying with you in May of 2013?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And did they leave your house there in Oxford a certain night for Ron to go to court?
A couple times that month.
Okay. Prior to the incident that we're here to talk about, did they leave the house there in Oxford?
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that there.
Usually when he has to go to court, if he has court on a Monday or Tuesday, he will leave the house the night before. His mother will come and pick him up from Walmart. So he usually goes in advance to do everything. If he has to be in court, he'll go ahead and get dropped off at Walmart. His mother will come and pick him up before she goes to work, drop him off in downtown Raleigh, and then go to work.
So on the week of, we'll start with Sunday, May 12th, is that when Ronald and Travion left your home there in Oxford?
Yes, sir.
And about what time did they leave on that Sunday?
I believe I worked till 6 or 8 that night. So I usually just go ahead and go to work with her. So I was pretty much hanging out too, and then I went to work, and then eventually his mom will show up, and then she'll pick them up.
From the Walmart in Wake Forest?
Yes, sir.
When Ronald and Travion left the house there in Oxford, did you see them leave with anything in particular?
Just the normal, a book bag, maybe a little bit of clothes, and that's really it.
And was that typical of them to leave with a backpack and clothes?
Yes, sir.
Why is that, Ms. Alberts?
I guess because they predicted they were going to be gone for a while. I didn't really question it too much because it was something I was used to seeing. So they would normally leave and be gone. Usually Ron would be gone about 2-3 days, and then he'd eventually come back.
And when Ronald left this Sunday night or Sunday evening, did he tell you, hey, I'll be back on X day or come pick me up on a certain day?
Pretty much I'll be back.
And other than him going to court, did you know where he would be?
No, sir.
And how about Travion? Did you have any conversation with him about when he'll be back or when you'll see him again?
No, sir.
And Miss Alberts, when they traveled together like this, did they go and come together or separate?
They went together. If they went together, they came back together.
And throughout the time they were living with you, that was what you saw them doing?
Mm-hmm.
Was that the last time you saw Travion and Ronald prior to May 14th of 2013?
Yes, sir.
When was the next time that you saw Ronald Anthony and Travion Smith?
Believe it was on a Wednesday. They had came to the Walmart in Wake Forest, and when I saw them, they were with his mother, Ronald's mother, and they had got dropped off over by Andy's, by a GameStop and Sally in Wake Forest right across.
Can you say that again? I lost you a little bit there.
Andy's, it's a fast food place, and GameStop and Sally's, it's right beside Walmart. They got dropped off over there, and I met them over there because I was on lunch.
So you said it was a lunch around noon or a little bit earlier?
I couldn't even tell you what time it is.
And you're sure it was the mom that dropped him off this time?
Yes, sir.
When you saw were Ronald and Travion together at this point?
Yes, sir.
What, if anything, did you notice about them when they were dropped off on that Wednesday?
Nothing different. They still the same. He said hi. Ronald kind of had like a little attitude, kind of like he was upset, but it was normal to me because every time I always saw him, he kind of seemed to be different. I guess he had a guilty conscience. Maybe he wasn't doing something he wasn't supposed to be doing. So it was just something normal to me to see.
You mentioned that they took clothes with them when they left on that Sunday. Do you recall what each of them were wearing when they left Oxford on that Sunday night?
No, I don't remember.
How about when they came back? Do you recall if they were wearing the same clothes, different clothes?
I know they weren't wearing the same clothes. I do remember Ronald in a white tank top, but anything else I couldn't tell you.
Now, Miss Alberts, when you met up with them there at the Walmart in Wake Forest on that midweek Wednesday or so, what happened then?
They got out of the car. We went over to Andy's. I got me something to eat because I only had an hour and I had to go back to work. I got something to eat. I tried to ask him what was wrong. He wouldn't really talk much. And then he asked to use my phone, so I let him use my phone for a little bit. He kept saying he was going to use it more, so I said just bring it back to me because he didn't have a phone because he couldn't afford to pay for a phone because he didn't have a job. So I gave him my phone and I went back to work.
Now, this phone, the phone, was it unusual for Ronald to use your phone?
No, sir.
Okay, tell us about that.
He used my phone on a typical basis. He didn't have one, so he would use it. I didn't know what he was typically doing. I tried to stay away from it, kind of like not be the nosy girlfriend. So I let him use it. I would sit on the bar that they had over at Andy's, and I would just eat. I walked over to him and tried to ask him what he was doing, and he was just said he was just looking at stuff. And then I told him just bring my phone back, and he just said okay.
How about Travion, Miss Alberts? Did you talk with him any when he came back?
No.
You mentioned that they had book bags with them when they left. Did they have book bags with them when they came back to Wake Forest?
Yes, sir.
What, if anything, did you notice about those book bags when they came back?
They were a lot bulkier than usual.
Did you see what was inside of them?
No.
There at the Andes in Wake Forest on that day, did Ronald or Travion show you any piece of electronic equipment that they had brought back with them at this point?
Eventually, when I went to break, they had shown me they had 2 laptops.
And was this the first time that you'd seen those laptops?
Yes.
Miss Alberts, can you describe those laptops for us?
Ronald had a orange one. It was a touch screen. You could turn it and it could be just like a tablet, or you could use the keyboard on it. Travion had a silver one, exactly the same.
And prior to Ronald Anthony and Travion Smith leaving your home there in Oxford on that Sunday night, had you ever seen these laptops before?
No, sir.
Did you talk to either one of them, that being Travion or Ronald, about where these laptops had come from?
No, sir.
And when you saw these laptops, were they nice? What did you think about them?
They were pretty nice, not my kind of style, but they were pretty nice laptops.
And what was going to happen with the laptops?
First, Ronald said he wanted to keep them. He wanted to keep it to use it to be able to go to school. He knew I wanted to go back to school, so he thought it would be a better idea to keep it. And about a couple minutes later, he eventually tried to give it to me and tried to say it was a gift to me. I said I didn't want it. It just wasn't something for me. I'm not kind of stupid when it comes to Ron. I know how he is, so I didn't want anything or any part of what it possibly could have been.
And you said it really wasn't your style of laptop, but did you have some suspicions maybe there was something
It's the new Windows, so it had that block style. Instead of just a regular, you open it, press start, and you go to what you need to go to. It's more of the kind of like an Xbox kind of style of the way it had everything displayed, and I didn't like that type of stuff.
And besides not liking the style of it, were you suspicious of the laptop as well?
Oh, of course.
And then the gray laptop. Who had the gray laptop?
Travion Smith.
Did you do anything with that laptop?
No,
See
sir.
it? I mean, you obviously saw it.
Yeah.
Did you interact with it, play
No,
with
sir.
it? What ended up happening with those laptops, Miss Alberts, if you know?
Ronald kept it. They both kept theirs. They played with them when they were at Walmart, or eventually when we got home, they would try to see, I guess what they could do with them or what kind of styles they were or anything like that. Then eventually, a couple days later, Ronald decided that he wanted to sell it. And he didn't want it anymore because we needed the money.
And when you say they were playing with these laptops, did a couple days pass before they decided to sell the laptops?
Yes, sir.
And during the couple of days, did both Ronald Anthony and Travion Smith handle and play with these laptops, as you said?
Yes, sir.
How did Ronald go about selling his laptop, the orange one?
I don't believe he ever really talked to anybody about it. I don't know for sure. I do know that he started taking pictures of it. It was in Andy's that he started taking pictures of it. I didn't really ask much about it. He just asked to use the phone so he could take pictures of it because we needed to sell it. So I just gave my phone up and just let him go ahead and do whatever he needed to do.
Okay, so to be clear, Ms. Alberts, that when they first get back to Wake Forest Walmart on, I think you said on that Wednesday, then you went to Andy's that day as well?
Yes, sir.
Okay, then on a later date, you were back at that same Andy's with the laptops? And yes or no, just so
Yes.
the record can reflect your answer. Thank you. Tell us a little bit about him taking pictures of the laptop.
I remember they were in a booth at Andy's when it was still open. Silver booths, shiny. Travion was on the other side of it. He just kept taking pictures of it. I didn't really ask much about it. I just ate lunch and went about my business.
But you gave Ronald Anthony permission to use your phone to
Yes, sir.
take these photographs. And have you had the opportunity to review those photographs?
Since then, yes, sir.
The silver laptop, were pictures taken of that laptop at that time?
Not of my knowledge.
And you kind of mentioned the orange laptop was Ronald's, and then Travion had the silver one. Did they ever, give them back and forth to each other, or was it pretty much orange one was always Ron's and the silver one was always Travion's?
From what I've always saw, the orange one was Ronald's and the silver one was Trey's.
What happened after those pictures were taken at the Andes there in Wake Forest, Ms. Alberts?
As far as my acknowledgement, I know they stayed on my phone. I saw them on there, but I didn't really mess with them. I didn't really ask any questions. I just knew he took the pictures. I don't know if he sent them to anyone or had put them on any site or anything like that.
And what happened next between you and Ronald and Travion?
I know they came back to Walmart eventually. He gave me back my phone, and then Trey had asked to use my phone, so I let him go ahead and use my phone.
And at some point, did y'all go back to Oxford that night?
Yes, sir.
Anything else unusual happened that day in terms of with your interactions with Ronald and Travion?
No, they pretty much acted like normal.
And Miss Alberts, the May 20th sound like about the right day for when these photographs would have been taken on your phone at the Andes.
I guess so.
couple days after they first got back to Wake Forest?
Yes, sir.
The next day, going to May 21st of 2013, did you have to work that day?
Yes, sir.
What did Ronald and Travion do that day as well?
Just hang out, sit in what was Blimpie's, which is a sub shop. They sat in there, or they would go down to Andy's, or they would go walk around.
And let me back up. Did they come, you went to your job at the Walmart in Wake Forest?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Did Travion and Ronald come with you that night?
Yes, sir.
Excuse me, that day.
Yes, sir.
And how'd y'all get to Wake Forest that day?
Joey and Michelle's car.
What kind of car did they drive?
It was a 4-door Honda.
Civic, Accord, do you recall?
I couldn't tell you. I knew it was small.
Okay. And generally, what kind of shape was this car in?
Not the best.
While you were there at work at Walmart, did you become aware of something going on with Ronald and Travion?
No.
When did you become aware of the police arriving at some point?
When about 5 coworkers came up to me and said, your boyfriend's getting arrested.
And Ronald being your boyfriend?
Yes, sir.
So you were working at the Walmart that day, right?
Yes, sir.
And what type of work did you do? I think you said you were a cashier.
Yes, sir.
Could you see Travion and Ronald that entire time?
Not from outside. How their doors are and how the registers are, they're lined up against basically a full block wall, and then the doors are like a couple feet away, so you can't really see outside. And of course, where they had them, everybody was over on the cart side, which is on the far side of the building. And
you're talking about when they got arrested?
Yes, sir.
I'll back you up. What time did you have to get to work that day?
I believe it was 11 o'clock that morning.
And were Travion and Ronald with you the entire time there in Walmart?
Not the entire time.
You said they were at Blimpie's hanging out a little?
Yeah, it's attached inside the Walmart.
Could you see were they there at the Blimpie's the entire time?
I could see them from, inside when I was working in Blimpie's.
And could you tell if they left at any point?
Yes, sir.
Do you know where they went?
No idea.
Do you know if they left together?
I know Trey had left because he had asked for my phone, so I let him use my phone. Eventually, he had brought it back, and then he had left and Ronald had left with him.
About what time did Travion ask for your phone?
It was early in the morning. It was right before, I think it was right before I went to work or right after I had just started going to work.
Do you know who he contacted?
No, sir.
Do you know an individual by the name of Michael McCullough?
Yes, sir.
Who is Michael McCullough?
He's a friend of Ronald's. I never really had any conversation with him. It would pretty much be a, hey, how are you? How have you been? You know, I'd ask about his kids, and he'd ask me how work is, and that would be really it.
Do you know if Travion and Michael McCullough knew each other?
No, I had no acknowledgement of them knowing each other at all. I knew they had never met before. He had never really came around. Michael had never really came around when Trey was around.
Travion and Ronald kind of in and out during your shift starting at 11 o'clock, is that fair to say?
Yes, sir.
And then you said you became aware that they were being arrested or there were police in the Walmart parking lot. About what time was that, Miss Albers?
I couldn't tell you. I know it was in the day because I remember I got off at 8 o'clock that night. But I know it was in the day, and I think it was probably around like 2, 3 o'clock, I want to say.
Still light outside?
Yes.
When you became aware that the police were interacting with Ronald and Travion, did you go kind of find out what was going on or try to find out what was going on?
Yes, I asked my supervisor if it was okay if I took a break. She said to give her a couple minutes, that she was going to get somebody to cover me because you can't really leave customers in a line while you want to go run outside and check something. So I gave her a couple minutes. She got somebody to cover me, and I went outside.
And what did you see when you got outside?
A lot of cars, a lot of people. Trey wasn't there. I didn't see him if he was. Ronald was standing outside. There was a couple cops that were undercover, and then there was a couple regular cops, and they had said that they were going to take Ronald to, I believe, Six Forks or Atlantic. I knew it wasn't downtown. They were going to take him to a station, and they were going to question him, and that he possibly would be back.
And Ms. Alberts did in fact Ronald Anthony leave at that time to go with the police.
Yes, sir.
Later in your shift, were you contacted by Raleigh police detectives?
Yes, sir.
One of the detectives wearing a bow tie?
That's the only way I remember him.
Right. And why did that detective want to speak with you?
He said that he wanted to search the car. He wanted to talk to me about a situation. And also, they just wanted to look at my phone and see some things.
And Miss Alberts, did you comply and let that detective look at your phone at that point?
Yes, of course.
And you let him look at it. Did he take it away from you as well?
Yes, I was young. Cell phones are your life. They die, you go crazy. So I was kind of upset, but he said if I gave him time to take whatever he needed off the phone, he would more than likely bring it back to me. So I complied and I let him take it.
And did he bring it back?
Yes.
And you said that he was looking for something there on the phone. What did he tell you what he was looking for?
He showed me the pictures that Ronald had taken of the laptop and had told me that this laptop was stolen and it tied him to a murder.
And did you acknowledge to that detective that those photographs were on your phone?
Yes.
What else did you do with the detectives there at the Walmart parking lot that afternoon?
When they had showed up, they were actually right across from the car. The car did not belong to me. They asked me if I allowed them to search the vehicle, and I told them the car did not belong to me. They would have to ask Michelle. They asked Michelle, and Michelle said it was perfectly fine. We kind of stood to the side, watched them, and they just searched through the stuff. They took some stuff of Ronald's. I didn't really question it too much. I just kind of let them have it. And then they asked for my cell phone, and that's when I freaked.
But everything worked out, you're saying?
Yes.
Later on that night, did you again have an interaction with the Raleigh Police Department at your home?
Yes.
And later on that night, going into the morning of May 22nd of 2013?
Yes.
What happened at your home that night?
They called. They said that they were 5 minutes away and that they were coming to give me a search warrant. I told them it was really late. Is there any way possible we could do this later? They said no. So they didn't really have to agree upon it, but we made an agreement. If they were quiet, because there was 2 kids in the house, I didn't want to wake them up. Everybody had to work. Everybody still had a life to live. It wasn't their fault they got involved in something that didn't have anything to do with them. They said fine. They came in the house. They were really quiet, stepping on their tiptoes, and they came in the room, and I sat on the bed.
And what were the detectives looking for when they came to your house?
They said they were looking for a bunch of stuff that had been taken from cars that had been broken into, cell phones, GPSs. They had mentioned something about an iPod, but they didn't find it that night. I just sat on the bed. I said there's a big bag right there on Ronald's side of the bed, which would be on the right side of the room, the far. He had a big, huge bag under a table. It's a nightstand. It's a 2-layer nightstand. He had that, and then they asked me if there was anything in the closet, and I just showed them where the closet was and just pretty much watched.
And let me back up just a little bit, Ms. Alberts. When Ronald came back to Wake Forest, I guess on that Wednesday, did he have items with him that you had not seen him with before?
Yes, sir.
What types of items? Besides, we've talked about the laptops, obviously, besides the laptops.
He had GPSs, phone chargers, phone cords, cell phones, just miscellaneous stuff to me that seemed like it was just pointless to have.
Did you question either Ronald or Travion about these items?
I kind of figured where they came from.
And I've mentioned Ronald. How about Travion? Did he have similar items with him as well?
I don't know exactly what he had in his book bag, but I know that they had pretty much, I guess, the same stuff. Eventually, I guess they put it all together, and I know that they had...
Just answer what you either saw or know for certain. Don't guess about anything.
Okay.
What items did you see with each of them?
I didn't really see anything that was in Trey's book bag. I didn't really ask any questions about what was in it, but I know in Ron's book bag there was a bunch of GPS, cell phones, and phone cords.
And you mentioned it a moment ago that you saw them put items together. What do you mean by that?
Eventually when we got home, which is, of course, probably later, they eventually put everything in the same bag that was on the right side of Ron's room.
And what type of items were put together?
The GPSs, phone cords, cell phones, all kinds of miscellaneous little things.
Again, these were items that you hadn't seen with them prior to them leaving on that Sunday night.
Yes, sir.
When the officers arrived there to perform the search warrant, did you assist them in any way in saying, pointing out different things that they were looking for?
The officers?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
How long would you say that they were there that early morning?
We weren't there long at all, probably 30, 45 minutes maybe.
And I know you probably don't have an inventory of what they took, but do you generally recall what types of items the officers took from your home there that night?
I know they were looking for clothes, shoes. They were looking for pants, shirts, undershirts, underwear, and then the bag of the miscellaneous items, which is GPSs, phone cords, cell phones, and anything else that I figured would be tied to that night.
And how about a camera? Do you recall a camera, Miss Alberts?
I believe so, and I believe it was in the bag with all the big, huge bag full of stuff with the...
And to be clear, where were the laptops at this point, if you know?
The laptops were with them. With Ronald Anthony had his, and Travion had his.
So when they left your residence there the morning of, I guess, May 21st, they took the laptops with them at that time?
Yes, sir.
So the laptops weren't there for the officers to find during the search warrant?
No, sir.
And Ms. Alberts, were you cooperative as much as you could be in the early morning hours of May 22nd?
Pointed wherever they needed to go.
How about Joseph and Michelle? Were they even involved with the search?
They were asleep,
And how about the kids? Did you try and keep them out of it as well?
pretty much.
After the officers left there that night, did you have any other interaction with Raleigh police officers during the course of this investigation?
I had conversations with Detective Brady, and I cannot remember his name, but I call him Bowtie. I had conversations with him. People were trying to talk to me, so I didn't really know what I was getting myself into. So they would give me the best advice that they can, or they would call and say, have you seen this item? If you do, can you please give us a call?
And specifically in regards to Detective Morris and wearing the bow tie, did you contact him about any specific item of evidence?
Yes. A couple days, like a day or two after they had came, and of course Ronald Anthony and Travion got arrested, some things happened to me, so I had to leave. I left. I waited a couple days. I finally came back to the house. He had called me and told me that he needed to find a purple iPod. And I told him I haven't seen it. But I told him when I packed up, if I found it, I'd of course give him a call. A couple days later, I had went back to the house and I had started packing my things. And on top of the entertainment center in the living room, I had found the purple iPod. So later in that day, I had called him and I said, hey, I packed my stuff and I found this. This is something you asked me for. I'm going to work. Is there any way that you can meet me at Walmart in Wake Forest and I'll give it to you this time? And he said, of course.
That purple iPod, can you describe it for us, ma'am?
It was really small. I knew it had a screen. It had some tape on it. It was kind of messed up a little bit. It wasn't in the best condition, but it was pretty nice. It was color. It was purple, and I remember it saying Claire's iPod.
Had you seen that iPod with either Travion Smith or Ronald Anthony while they were there at your house in Oxford?
I've seen Ronald look at the iPod, but the main person I saw it with was Travion.
And prior to Ronald and Travion leaving your residence there on that Sunday evening, had you seen that iPod before?
No.
When they came back to Wake Forest, I guess in the middle of the week, around the 14th, was that the first time you had noticed that iPod?
Yes, sir.
And how many times would you say that you saw Travion handling that iPod?
In the beginning, he would just listen to the music. Wasn't really his type of music. It was kind of girly, but some of the songs on there were kind of good, I guess, for his type of music. So he would listen to it. Eventually, he tried to put music on it, but of course, we don't have internet out in Oxford, so you couldn't really do much. So I guess he just dealt with what music was on there. He played with it every once in a while, and then eventually he'd put it up.
Let me have just a moment.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Alberts, I want to walk you through several items of evidence that have already been introduced. We'll start with State's Exhibits number 42, 40, 41, 38, 39, 49, 48, 47, 46, 45, 44, 43, and 42. Got a little bit out of there. I apologize. But take a look at those photographs. Tell me if you recognize what those photographs are.
This is Ronald's laptop.
The orange laptop that you've been referring to?
Yes, sir.
Okay. These photographs, are those the photographs that you saw on your phone when Detective Morris talked with you back in May of 2013?
Yes, sir.
And these photographs appear to be in the same condition as what you saw there as when you saw them there on your phone?
Little fuzzy because they're blown up, but yes, sir.
Generally, yes. Okay. I want to ask you about several of these photographs. First of all, State's Exhibit 42. In the background, behind the orange laptop, there appears to be a person wearing a kind of a red and black and white checkered shirt. Do you recognize that shirt?
Yeah, that's Ronald's shirt.
Okay. In this photograph, can you tell who's wearing that shirt?
Travion.
State's Exhibit number 43. If you'll take a look at that photograph, and I want to again ask you about the individual seated behind the orange laptop. Does that appear to be the same shirt?
Yes, sir.
In State's Exhibit 43, which is a kind of the laptop with the screen facing you and a traditional keyboard out in front, like
yes, sir.
Traditional laptop, you can kind of see a reflection in the screen of the laptop. Can you see that individual?
That's Ronald.
So it appears to be Ronald's reflection in the screen?
With my cell phone, yes.
Okay. Again, State's Exhibit 44, same shirt in the background.
Yes, sir.
State's Exhibit number 45, again, same shirt in the background.
Yes, sir.
And then specifically on regards to State's Exhibit number 46, take a look at that photograph, and again, you can see the laptop in the foreground. Who is that there in the background?
Travion Smith.
Okay. And in that photograph, can you see kind of a side profile of him?
Pretty much.
Okay. There's some tattoos, and it looks like he's wearing a black hat with a red bill.
Yes, sir.
That black hat with the red bill, is that a cap that you've seen Travion wear on a regular basis?
I've seen him wear it before, not on a regular basis. Him and Ronald would kind of share clothes. So he would sometimes wear some of Ronald's hats or shirts.
State's Exhibit number 39, you described the unique booths that the Andes have, where now a Highway 55. Does that look like the silver booths that are present in an Andes?
Well, was. All of them have shut down, but yes, sir.
And finally, I want you to take a look at State's Exhibit number 40. And in that photograph, you mentioned this laptop can kind of flip and bend and go into what we kind of call a tablet.
Yes, sir.
Take a look at, under the Start menu here, there appears to be there's a weather box and then a S&P 500 box. Looking at that S&P 500 box, can you tell what date is listed on that S&P 500 app or green box there?
May 20th, 2013, 12:22 p.m.
And Ms. Alberts, now that you testified here before us, do you recall that is about the date and time in which Ronald Anthony took these pictures with your phone?
Yes, sir.
So that timestamp appears to be fairly correct,
Yes, sir.
consistent with your memory.
What I can remember, yes, sir.
I'm going to show you what has been previously identified as State's Exhibits 24 and 24A. 24A, do you recognize that item?
Yes, sir.
What is that item?
That is Ronald Anthony's laptop that he had carried with him.
And you again said Ronald Anthony's laptop, the one that he had with him when he was in Wake Forest or Oxford with you.
Yes, sir.
States Exhibit 25 and then contents being 25A, what does that appear to be now?
That's the gray laptop that Travion Smith carried with him.
Both in Oxford and in Wake Forest?
Yes, sir.
You mentioned briefly a camera that you may have seen while you were there in Oxford. I'm going to hand you 26 and 26A. I'm going to remove the camera from 26A, which is kind of the case. Does that camera look familiar, ma'am?
Yes, that's the camera that the cops had pulled out of the bag.
This camera, had you seen it in your residence there in Oxford prior to Travion Smith and Ronald Anthony leaving prior to May 14th of 2013?
No, sir.
And again, you said it was in a bag.
Big, huge bag full of GPS's, cell phones, and cords.
And do you recall if it came out of Travion's bag or Ronald's bag?
I do not know.
Finally, State's Exhibit 14 has been introduced into evidence. You mentioned the purple iPod. I'll show you State's Exhibit 14A. Do you recognize State's Exhibit 14A?
Yes, sir.
What is State's Exhibit 14A?
That's Claire's iPod.
And is this the iPod that you saw Travion Smith handling while he was there at your house in Oxford?
Yes, sir.
And you said he was trying to put music on it and things like that?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Ms. Hunt. Can we have just a moment, Charlie?
Yes.
Yeah, read it.
Yes.
Miss Albert, you said as part of what the officers were looking for when they came to your house was specific items of clothing.
Yes, sir.
Clothing. Shoes. Did Detective Moore speak with you about shoes?
He said that he was looking for a blue pair of shoes.
Okay. And did you assist Detective Morse in identifying those shoes?
Yes, sir.
I'm going to hand you what has previously been marked as State's Exhibit number 57. 57 is the brown bag, and I'm going to remove the contents of 57. Try not to completely destroy the bag. I'm going to mark these shoes as State's Exhibits number, oops, thank you, ma'am, 57A and 57B. State's Exhibit number 57A and 57B. Do you recognize these shoes, Miss Albert?
Yes, sir.
Whose shoes are these?
The only person I ever saw wearing these shoes was Ronald.
Okay. And how would you describe these shoes, ma'am? What color are they?
They're blue.
Blue and black?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. when Detective Morse came and was taking items from your house in Oxford that night, are these one of the pairs of shoes that you pointed out to him?
Yes, sir.
Or the pair of shoes that you pointed out to him?
Yes, sir.
Where were these shoes located when you pointed them out to Detective Morse?
They were in the living room.
And the only person you've seen wearing these shoes is Ronald Anthony?
Yes, sir.
I'm going to hand you what has been previously marked. 60. What's now been marked? I'm sorry, what's marked? This State's Exhibit number 60. I'm going to remove the contents of that bag. Mark those as 60A and 60B. Do you recognize these items, Ms. Alvarez?
I never saw Ronald wearing them, but I've never seen them before until Travion.
Until Travion?
Yes.
Tell me, well, first of all, let's identify them. 60A and 60B, just what are these?
They're Nike red and black shoes.
And so you've never seen Ronald Anthony wearing these shoes?
I've seen him try them on,
Okay.
but I've never seen him wear them on a consistent basis.
And then you said, how about Travion? Have you ever seen Travion with these shoes?
Yes, sir.
Okay, when have you seen Travion wearing these shoes?
He came with him when he came to the house in Franklinton in April. And then he would normally sometimes wear them, and then sometimes he would wear Ronald Anthony's shoes.
Sometimes he would wear what?
Ronald Anthony's shoes.
These shoes, the red and black Nikes, are the ones you knew that Travion Smith to wear.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do you recall when they left prior to May of 2014 what shoes that each of them were wearing?
Maybe 2013.
To
But
2013, excuse me.
No, sir.
You don't recall. All right. Thank you, ma'am. Kind of along those lines, Ms. Alberts, after Ronald Anthony was arrested, did he contact you from jail?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And did he ask you to do anything?
Not on the phone.
How did he contact you, first of all?
From the jail, he called me collect.
Okay. But you said he contacted you and asked you to do something else, not on the phone?
He wrote me a letter.
Letter, okay. Do you still have that letter?
No, sir.
What was the message that was relayed to you in that letter?
He asked me to get rid of everything. I didn't know specifically what he was talking about, and I did not want to get involved in it.
Were there any specific items that he asked you to get rid of, if you recall?
Clothes.
And what type of clothes?
All the clothes that the detectives had taken.
How about shoes?
He didn't say.
Ms. Alberts, at any point, did you get rid of any evidence in this case?
No, sir.
Whether it be clothes? Did you get rid of any clothes?
No, sir.
Any weapons, knives, guns, crowbars, anything?
No, sir.
Did you, at your residence, did y'all have a bonfire out back?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about that. Did y'all have a bonfire on a nightly basis or once every blue moon? Tell me about that.
Wasn't once in a blue moon, but it was something they did not on a regular basis, but when they could find something to burn.
And when you say when they could find something to burn, who are you talking about?
Joey Perry is the one that had actually made it. It's a homemade little fire pit, kind of just on the ground, throw some wood and burn it, and it just made its own kind of like area. Whenever he would find something that he didn't need anymore, which would be Joseph Perry, on his own, he would burn it. Ronald Anthony had nothing to do with that at that time.
How about when they came back, when Ronald and Travion came back to Wake Forest after May 14th of 2013? Do you know if y'all had a bonfire at your house at any point that week?
Yes, sir.
Were Ronald and Travion involved with that bonfire?
I know Ronald was.
How about Travion?
I do not remember.
May we have just one moment?
Yes, sir.
this time, Your Honor.
Cross-examination? Yes. Members of the jury, I'm going to ask you to step in the deliberation room for a moment while we take up the matter outside of your presence. If you leave your notepads in your chairs, recall all the rules, and in particular, don't discuss the case among yourselves. Mr. Brown?
Yes, Your Honor. You had, we had agreed that if I was going to make any attempt to elicit references to Mr. Anthony's criminal record, including his most recent conviction, that I should ask leave of the court. And we would argue right now that we should be entitled to do that, and I have several points for why we should be able to do that. First of all, the issue of character was raised, of Mr. Anthony's character. She talked about him, I think, I can't remember exactly what he said, I didn't get it, was either a good person or not a good relationship and all, and that. So I think that's part of what she said. I think that opens up the door to it. She talked about specifically, and this I will admit goes to his prior record, but I think it's relevant. She talked about him getting out of prison. I think that means I'm entitled to talk about those prior offenses, which are 3 counts of conspiracy to commit armed robbery at that point. She talked at least twice about statements Mr. Anthony made, including status of the computer. She then talked about a letter that she received from him, which I think clearly constitutes asking her to do things that clearly could be argued as admissions from him of guilt. I think we are entitled at that point to impeach that. And the case I would cite for that is State v. McConico. I have a Southeast 2nd site of 570 Southeast 2nd 776 on page 780. It's a 2002 case. And that holds for the proposition that an out-of-court, a statement made by a out-of-court declarant, you can impeach as though the declarant is testified. It's not even subject to Rule 403 analysis under this case. And I could impeach it like I would do a regular person, which is conviction, when it was, and what the sentence was.
All right. Mr. Wilder, Ms. Shakir, and I assume you're relying on Rule 806.
Yes, Rule 806.
All right.
Yes.
You wish to be heard?
Your Honor, I still don't think we're there in terms of a relevancy argument. This is Amber Alberts, who is not Ronald Anthony. I mean, he's not on the stand testifying. If they want to call him, then that's fine. They can do that. But to impeach, I mean, impeaching Amber Alberts with Ronald Anthony's convictions, I don't see that is. I don't see that for impeachment purposes at all. I mean, certainly if they want to question her about the statements they made and his and the letter and whatnot, I think that's appropriate. But then to put in a first-degree murder conviction for impeachment purposes on that, I don't see. And I again would stand by our argument that we made in the motion in limine. And if we can look, I haven't been given a copy of this case, so if we could look at that for a moment as well.
That's fine.
Yes. And I'm sorry, I did not have a chance. I have another argument too with it. To add to it, we also think that it, and this, if we need to go there, could go a little bit with proffering. We would argue that the first-degree murder conviction would also go a bit to bias in that this was not elicited, but we would intend to elicit the fact that she continued to have communications with him after the arrest and attempted to write him after his guilty plea. She told the district attorneys in the meeting with her that Ronald Anthony was a good guy. That meeting was in January after the plea. That goes to bias, the fact that she already knows that he pled guilty to first-degree murder and still calling him a good guy. So I think that's a further argument, along with the other arguments that we made.
Do you have copies of that case?
I am sorry.
All right. You're able to pull it up. All right, take a moment to review that, and I'll also look at it.
That's why in Rule 806, that it has to be inconsistent with the hearsay statement. There's nothing about any one, I would argue too, the hearsay statements that were just made were not made for the truth of the matter asserted. They were for what Miss Alberts did. But even let's say the getting rid of his letter to get rid of certain items of evidence is not inconsistent with him pleading guilty to first-degree murder. If he'd sent her a letter or made a statement to her, "I didn't do it," then that would be inconsistent, and arguably we have an issue at that point. But that's not where we are. There's nothing about what she said on this witness stand that is inconsistent with with Ronald Anthony being involved with a first-degree murder.
I think that sentence that you're referring to, it's permissible to impeach a hearsay declarant statement with a prior inconsistent statement. That is one method that could be used under Rule 806. But and what that sentence goes to is the fact that there's not an opportunity of the declarant to explain or deny the inconsistent statement. I think the broader purpose of Rule 806 is that the credibility of the declarant may be attacked, and if attacked, may be supported by any evidence which would be admissible for the purposes, for those purposes, if the declarant had testified as a witness. And I assume I need to ask for further clarification, but I assume the impeaching information that Mr. Brown is referring to is he's bringing it in under Rule 609, prior conviction, the time and place of the conviction, the name of the crime, and the punishment imposed. And I believe under Rule 806 that is appropriate under these circumstances. There were statements that were elicited from this witness that were offered for the truth of the matter asserted. I'm not sure the letter falls in that category, but certainly other statements were offered for the truth. And let me ask you, Mr. Brown, on that, you talked about character and things of that sort. Are you also seeking to raise like Rule 405 evidence, or are you just limiting your inquiry, your Rule 806?
Well, I think I was going to, I think with her, what I was planning to ask her, some of the things that she referred to, I mean, that the relationship that he was, it was cheating and all. I was going to refer to the fact that he was in prison, but I think I can go through that, simply talking about at the time he had his charges, which I believe, reading correctly, is 3 counts of conspiracy to armed robberies where he came out of prison doing that, and talk about that he has a conviction for first-degree murder, that, that he pled guilty to first-degree murder, received a life sentence in September of 2015. And that's what I am trying to do at that point. I had the other backup theories, but I think this would suffice for what we intend to do with it.
I guess the scope of the impeaching evidence is Rule 609 evidence.
Yes.
You're not, because I'm not making any ruling on prior instances of conduct other than criminal conduct under Rule 609 is really what I'm asking about.
Well,
And the cheating.
and cheating as a cheating spouse only to the extent that she sort of already brought it up, that shows, that more goes to bias.
Right.
With
And
that.
I think that's within
what?
within the scope of the direct. I don't see that as a Rule 405 issue.
punishment will come in as well.
Yes, I believe that's within the scope of Rule 609. Is what's permitted, what is permitted under Rule 609 is the name of the crime, the time and place of the conviction, and the punishment imposed. Anything further, Mr. Waller? All right. All right, I'm going to allow the cross-examination consistent with Rule 609. All right, let's bring jurors back in.
Albert is pregnant. Are you good?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your patience. And again, please don't speculate about what occurs outside your presence. Cross-examination, Mr. Brown.
Yes. Good morning, Miss Albert. My name is Jonathan Brown. I represent Travion Smith. And I don't believe you and I have ever met. Is that
No,
correct?
sir.
Okay. Ma'am, you are aware that in September of 2015, Ronald Anthony pled guilty to first-degree murder,
Yes, I was told.
okay, and that occurred here in Wake County,
Yes, sir.
and that he received a sentence of life imprisonment without parole.
Yes, sir.
No, this would object to the record at this time and would ask for limiting instruction at this point as well.
All right, members of the jury, this evidence is being received solely for the purposes of impeaching or attacking the credibility of the out-of-court statements made by Mr. Anthony that have been testified to by this witness. You're not to consider it for any other purpose other than in assessing the credibility of those out-of-court statements of Mr. Anthony. Go ahead, sir.
Right. And, ma'am, you mentioned that when you first met Mr. Anthony, he had just gotten out of prison.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you were aware that he had been convicted in July 31st of 2008 of 3 counts of conspiracy to commit armed robbery?
I did not know what he was convicted of. I just knew he got out of prison.
Okay. You weren't aware that it was that it was here in Wake County?
No, sir.
And were you aware that he was also convicted of making a false bomb report?
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
You were also aware that he was also convicted of making a false bomb report?
No, sir.
Okay. You and Mr. Anthony were a couple,
You could say yes.
off and on,
Yes, sir.
for 6 years. You had an intimate relationship, a sexual relationship.
Yes, sir.
Okay. In May of 2013, he was living with you.
On and off. Yes, sir.
I don't know. You were still a couple at that point.
Yes, sir.
Do you have children together?
No.
You don't? Okay. Now, he had never told you explicitly that he was going out with Sarah Redden. Is that correct?
No, sir.
Okay. But you had ways of knowing that he had a girlfriend on the side.
Not stupid, so yes.
Okay. Not stupid. You knew that he had another girlfriend. In fact, Sarah was not the first other girl that had been in your relationship.
No, sir.
He had a lot of other girlfriends.
Yeah.
Okay. But you continued to stay with Ron.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And he would always be using your phone,
Yes, sir.
and you'd be providing him a place to live.
Yes, sir.
Ron's a smart guy.
Yeah. School-wise, he's very smart.
And you told the police that Ron has a temper.
He can.
Objection.
Sustained.
No? Even after Ron got arrested, you continued to write and speak with him at least to the beginning of 2015.
Yes, sir.
And you attempted to write a letter with him as recently as December of last year.
Yes, sir.
And you talked with the district attorneys last month, I believe it was.
Yes, sir.
And you said at one point Ron's a good guy.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll talk a little bit about Ronald's mother. She would always provide him with rides,
Yes, sir.
would drive him different places,
Yes, sir.
would bring him change of clothes,
Yes.
change of clothes.
Yes, sir.
She was always sort of there for him
When she could be.
when she could be.
Yes.
And if she wasn't providing him rides, you or some other friends would be providing him with rides.
Yes, sir.
Talk a little bit about Travion Smith. You and Travion were not boyfriend and girlfriend.
No.
Okay. Never had any type of sexual relationship with Travion.
No.
Okay. He began living with you a couple months before May of 2013? Maybe in April?
It was about end of March, beginning of April.
Okay, maybe about 6 weeks. Does that sound about right?
Roughly, yes.
Okay. And when they would both be staying with you, Ron would be staying in your room.
Yes, sir.
Travion would be staying in the living room,
Yes, sir.
sleeping on the couch?
Yes, sir.
Right. And you knew that Travion had been kicked out of his family's house?
I knew his father had asked him to leave.
Okay.
I didn't know why.
Okay. He had nowhere else to go?
What I was told.
Okay. You didn't think anybody cared about him?
Objection.
Sustained.
You told the police you thought Travion had a brain imbalance.
Objection.
Sustained.
It goes to showing her perceptions of him.
I'm not allowing it under Rule 701.
All right. Let's talk about things that you saw about Travion. Travion would sit there and not say much.
Objection.
Overruled.
Travion would sit there and not say much.
Kind of kept to himself.
Kept to himself. He would say his brain was not right.
Objection.
The question was, did he say that?
Travion would say that his brain was not right, going to
Overruled.
state of mind. Yeah.
Your Honor, that under hearsay statements of self-serving.
Sustained.
Motion to strike.
Jurors to disregard.
I'm going to want to make a proffer at some point, Your Honor.
That's fine.
Let's talk about the night that you later learned, at some point you learned that Melissa Huggins-Jones had been killed. Is that correct?
All over the news.
All over the news. So I'd like to ask you some questions about that night. Ron came home that night. Is that correct?
What night?
The night after May 14th.
Yes, sir.
Okay. He took the clothes out of his knapsack and put them in the hamper?
Yes, sir.
Okay. He then began to wash his clothes in the washing machine?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And they, you said that he and Travion brought home 2 laptops?
Yes, sir.
And you could tell that they were stolen?
Not dumb.
Okay. Not dumb, meaning you figured out that they had...
Two people who don't have a job aren't going to have very nice laptops.
Right. And we talked about that you had gotten a letter from Ron from jail?
Yes, sir.
And he asked you to get rid of some of the clothing.
Yes, sir.
Get rid of a red shirt, I believe?
No, sir.
Did he say to get rid of some shirts?
He asked me to get rid of shirts and clothes.
Okay.
But I
you-
didn't do anything.
You didn't do it, but that's what he asked you to do.
Yes, sir.
He asked you to get rid of a red shirt.
He didn't specifically say.
Okay. But he did ask you to get rid of some clothing and some shoes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. But the police had already taken those items.
Even if they wouldn't have, they did take them, but even if they wouldn't have, I wouldn't have.
Okay, they
touched
took
it.
the items already?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You never gave that letter to the police?
No, sir.
Okay. Or showed the police the letter?
No, sir.
You got rid of that letter?
I didn't really throw it away, freak out. I just kind of, when I went through my stuff, I was just throwing things away. So it was
So you did throw away?
miscellaneous throwaway, yeah.
Right, you threw away the letter?
Yeah.
Okay. And you also had a pair of bloody boxers?
Not to my knowledge.
And you got rid of the bloody boxers?
No, I did not.
No. You're aware that Michelle Perry said that you got rid of them?
Objection.
Sustained.
The big bag, you said, set of items you found in your room,
Yes, sir.
and you showed the police where that item was in the room.
Yes, sir.
Was underneath the bed?
No.
It was in the, but it was in the room that you and Ron shared.
Yes, sir.
Right. Let me ask you this. You have talked with the police during this investigation, is that correct? You never talked with any investigators for the defense.
No, sir.
Do you remember this lady coming out to your house?
I don't even remember what I did yesterday.
Okay. And you don't recall this lady coming out to your house and trying to talk with you?
Objection.
Sustained.
All right. I may have a moment, Your Honor.
Yes.
About that Ron afterwards was not acting that unusual from how he normally acted?
In some ways.
Okay. You said it was sort of normal for him to act like he had a guilty conscience?
Yes.
Normal for him to look upset?
Sometimes.
Okay. That's not unusual for him?
No.
If I may have a second?
Yes.
Ron did not have his own car,
No.
so and Ron did not have his own phone.
When he could afford to pay for it, he would, but not on a regular basis.
On a regular basis, he used your phone.
Yes, sir.
And Travion didn't have his own car.
No, sir.
Didn't. During the time that you were there were no family members of Travion that came around?
No, sir.
No friends that came around?
No, sir.
Okay. Except for Profer, that's all the questions that I have.
Redirect. That was all. And
Okay, sorry, I can hear. Yes, briefly, Your Honor. What would Travion do when he was at your house? Miss
He'd sit
Albert?
on the couch. He would, after the unfortunate situation, he'd play with the iPod or play with the tablet or laptop, or he would watch TV. We also had I believe it was a PS3. They would also, sometimes he would play the game with Ronald, or he'd watch Joey play the game sometimes. He'd go outside. He'd sit outside. He'd smoke.
What'd he smoke?
He smoked marijuana, and he also smoked cigarettes. So it was a rare occasion that he would smoke marijuana, but cigarettes he would ask me for because I was the one that had a job and could, of course, afford them. So he would ask me for a cigarette. Every once in a while, he would ask for my phone to call someone.
When he came back from, or when Travion and Ronald came back to Wake Forest after May 14th, at any point was Travion upset, distraught in any way?
Just quiet.
You, Mr. Brown asked you about Ron being a good guy. Okay. Tell us a little bit about that.
He has a good heart, but he does get himself in situations that are, he puts himself in the wrong place at the wrong time. And he does that a lot. He's smart in school-wise, but he can act very dumb.
Were you surprised to learn that Ronald had been charged with first-degree murder?
Very.
Why?
It doesn't seem like his character. He couldn't even spank a dog, more or less pop his kids for doing something they weren't supposed to be doing. So for somebody that you've known for so long, who can't even discipline his own children, to kill an innocent person, it just didn't seem like him.
And when you learned that he had pled guilty to first-degree murder and accepted responsibility, were you surprised again that he admitted his involvement in this?
Very.
And did you share these thoughts with your mother?
Yes, and she's still at the point of saying that she doesn't feel like he would do something like
Objection.
sustained.
Motion to strike.
Juries to disregard.
Were you again surprised that he had admitted his
There.
responsibility in this. And why again was that?
Objection.
Sustained. It's been asked and answered.
I may have just a moment.
Yes.
No further questions.
Recross?
There was some history of domestic violence between you and Ron, wasn't there?
He has never laid his hands on me.
He's never pushed you?
He's pushed me, but he's never like physically smacked me around. I don't know what the word y'all use for.
He's physically pushed you.
Yes.
And your mom was not happy about that relationship.
She did not know. She did not like the relationship at all.
Ron was 23 years old in May of 2013.
I believe so. I know his birthday is March 21st. So I believe so, yeah. 23, 24, around that range.
All right. No more questions.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a 15-minute recess.
Judge, before you do that, can we talk briefly, because we may need an extended break?
All right.
So if you could just wait for Lynn.
Okay, well, let me do this. Let me send the jury into the deliberation room. Ask the jurors just to wait for a moment, and I'll have the bailiff inform them as to what time they should be back from the break. Would that be acceptable?
Yes, sir.
All right, very good. So members of the jury, we are going to take a recess, but the amount of time, it may be that there are some issues that we'll need to consider, so we may have a rather extended break, maybe even through the lunch period. I'll let you know through the bailiff. If you'll recall all the instructions, leave your notebooks in your chairs and follow the bailiff into the deliberation room. So outside the presence of the jury, we'll first take up the proffer. Mr. Brown?
Mr. Smith told you that his brain was not working, did not work right.
He was unique.
Well, my question is, if I can just have 1 second, Your Honor, let me go back and make sure I get this. Travion would say that his brain was not right.
Yes, not in that words, but yes.
What words would he use?
He was very unique.
Is what Travion would say.
Yes.
And you interpreted that and you told the police what you said was Travion would say that his brain was not right.
Yes.
Okay. Your Honor, we would offer that as a proffer and argue that it should be admitted as not as for hearsay, but to show state of mind under the exceptions as an exception to the hearsay rule and as showing a state of mind, and also we'd argue that under due process in the Eighth Amendment it should be allowed in.
Your proffer is noted for the record. The ruling remains the same. The objection is sustained.
Thank you.
Now, so is this witness?
What's that?
Yes.
Anything further? All right. Ma'am, you may step down and release from subpoena. You're free to go.
Oh, my God, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, let's talk about scheduling. We are going to take a break, but let's talk about scheduling at this point.
I think we're at the point of bringing Sarah up. We need to talk for just a moment. I let Ms. Godwin know about, I left her voicemail outside. I haven't.
I've seen her around.
Okay.
Oh, she's talking.
Okay. So I think we're at that point. We need to talk for just a few moments to make sure we're satisfied at that. But if I had to say that we're at the Sarah Redden point.
All right. What I'm inclined to do is ask the jury to come back at 1:30, which will allow us 15 minutes to take a recess now, then an hour to consider Ms. Redden's the issues related to Ms. Redden. Anybody feel that?
I can't guarantee that would be enough time, but I guess I'm really bad at estimating time, so I'll maybe need to draw back about that.
All right, and then that would take us till about 12:30, if we had an hour for Ms. Redden's, the issues relating to that, and then that would give us a lunch recess from 12:30 to 1:30. So that would be, I think, the plan that we'd follow. I'd ask the jury to come back at 1:30. If we're not finished with the issues we need to consider, then we'll just press on. So bailiff, would you inform the jurors that they should return to the deliberation room at 1:30, and that they should go ahead and begin their lunch recess and relax until that time? Thank you, sir. All right, so we'll go ahead now and just take a 15-minute recess, and we'll resume at 11:30, and at that time we'll proceed on with whatever issues need to be discussed with respect to Ms. Redden.
Superior Court stands in recess for 15 minutes.